G'day guys, and welcome to the Life Outside podcast. This is officially episode 1 of the show. Very excited, been wanting to bring a show like this to you guys for many years actually. So finally making it happen. I'm Cam Bostock and I love the outdoors. The Life Outside podcast is all about sharing stories from outside to hopefully inspire you, the listener, to get outside as well. I'm currently sitting outside. I really wanted to record and film this show outdoors. It's very on theme. I've found out though how hard it is to record a podcast outside, probably why most podcasts film in a studio. I think this is my 4th attempt at this episode. I've had a few issues with weather and noise that just makes recording outside impossible. But if you are listening to this means that this attempt worked, and I'm glad that you're here. There is a video version for those who are just listening online, which you can watch on YouTube, and you'll be able to see exactly where I am in the bush, which is really cool. I'm most creative and at peace when I'm outside, and so I thought it was the best setting to record this show. We'll see how it works. I might have to end up switching to a studio if the quality is terrible, but definitely keen to hear you guys' feedback. This is episode 1, so it's only going to get better from here. For those who don't know, I just finished hiking the Pacific Crest Trail, which is a 3,000 mile, well, I walked 3,000 miles anyway. It's about a 2,650 mile officially long trail in the United States of America, from Mexico to Canada on the western side of the country. It was the most incredible experience of my life, and I'm assuming a lot of people that are listening right now probably followed my journey on the Pacific Crest Trail. I filmed daily videos, which I posted on Instagram. Got an incredible response, and finishing the hike, I had a lot of questions come through, ranging from all kinds of topics around the Pacific Crest Trail. So I thought, what better way to start the Life Outside podcast than doing a big Q&A, and I put a prompt out over on Instagram to get some questions from you guys. You guys definitely delivered. I had about 500 questions come through, so I've chosen a bunch that seemed really popular, so the most frequently asked questions, and I'm going to go through those in today's episode. So without any further ado, we're going to get straight into it. First question. Melinda asks, what made you choose the PCT to hike? Yeah, it's a good question. There's obviously so many long distance trails across the globe. I've done a lot of the big ones here in Australia where I'm from, but the Pacific Crest Trail, you know, if you're into backpacking or through hiking at all, you'll know the Pacific Crest Trail is essentially the pinnacle of long distance hiking. It is one of the most famous trails, one of the most historic trails, and for me, it's just always been at the top of my bucket list. And yeah, having the opportunity to hike it this year was incredible. I was going to jump at the chance. I was able to get a permit during the permit drop last year, and when I got accepted, I'm all in. I was straight onto the PCT, and no regrets. It was the most incredible trail I've ever walked. And there's obviously a ton of other, incredible trails across the world that I want to hike, but the PCT for me was always top of the list, and I don't see myself finding another trail quite like it. So yeah, it was awesome. Luigi asks, how much time did you spend planning the through hike? That's a good question. So I didn't really do much planning before I got my permit because there wasn't much point. If I didn't get a permit, then I wasn't going. For those who don't know, there is a limited amount of permits that the Pacific Crest Trail Association hands out each year. So if you don't get a permit, you just simply can't through hike the trail, at least not easily. But once I did get the permit, which was only a few months before my starting date, that's when the planning begun. For me, on these long distance hikes, I tend to try and do very minimal planning, just because so much can change on a hike that long. Nothing really ever goes to plan. And so, yeah, I didn't really do much planning. Obviously, I had to get my flights over to the US from Australia. Once my permit was sorted, that was all good. I had to get a visa to be able to stay in the US long enough to hike the trail. Other than that, I didn't do much research. I kind of just showed up at the southern terminus with a rough idea of what the next week on trail looked like, and I just went for it. There's a lot of information online. There's a lot of great apps you can use while you're on the trail, and obviously you're going to talk to people on the trail as well as you go, and things kind of just fall into place. That's just how through hiking works. So not a huge amount of planning beforehand. It was a lot of it was just on the fly. Hike with Lynn asks, I want to know more about your training leading up to the PCT. Yeah, I guess that ties in a bit to the planning and preparations for the PCT. I definitely did a bunch of training in the lead up. I've done a lot of hiking in the past, and so I just have a pretty good base level of hiking fitness. So that was a great start. But in the weeks and months leading up to the PCT, the main thing I aimed to do was just keep a really high level of daily steps. And that sounds pretty simple, and that's because it is. I just tried to stay above 20,000 steps a day, basically just getting as much time on feet as possible. And that could just mean parking a bit further away at the shops to walk in, or walking to the gym, or just going out for a hike, in the morning or at night, and just getting those steps up in whatever way I could. If I could do it on the trails, that was even better. If I could do it with a heavy backpack, that was even better. But daily steps is the simplest way. If I was to give advice to anyone, was just get your daily steps up in the lead up to a through hike. But I also did get into the gym a bunch before the trek, doing a lot of leg strengthening work. Nothing fancy. It was a lot of squats and lunges and calf raises and stuff like that. Also did quite a bit of prehab. I've had a lot of little injuries in hikes in the past, and so just working on some of my joint mobility and tendon strength and that kind of stuff in the lead up was really important for me as well. But the reality is with a through hike, you're going to start slow and you're going to build up strength as you walk. And so while training beforehand is great, definitely, you don't want to come in without having, ever walked before, but you're going to build up strength throughout the hike. And as long as you do it smartly, start slow and build into it, you're going to build a lot of fitness just while on trail. So that's something to think about as well. Becky asks, what made you pick the PCT over other hikes like the Appalachian? Yeah, similar to the first question, I guess. The PCT is just so iconic. And, I've thought about the Appalachian and trails like the Continental Divide and some trails in Europe before. But if I had to choose out of any trail, it was always going to be the PCT. The Appalachian specifically is obviously another really iconic through hike in the US. For me, it wasn't quite as appealing as the PCT. The Appalachian seems more like a social trail, less views, more rugged. I had a similar experience to that in New Zealand last year when I hiked Te Aroa. I did that trail solo. It was a lot more rugged. And so the Pacific Crest Trail just seemed like a fresh sort of experience where there would be less of a focus on socialization, and there'd be more views, and it'd be more remote and that kind of thing. So for me, the PCT was an obvious choice. In saying that, I made a lot of friends on the PCT. It was a very social experience for me, but I think the Appalachian is more known for that. So as a massive introvert, it was an obvious choice for me. Karen asked, what was the longest continuous hike you did before attempting the PCT? Te Aroa in New Zealand is a 3,000 kilometre long trail, and I hiked that in 2023, so last year. I did skip a bit of the trail, especially in the northern half of Te Aroa, so I think I walked, it was under 2,500 kilometres, so the PCT was going to be almost double the length of my previous longest hike, so a big jump up. But once you go over 1,000 or 2 kilometres, or like 1,000 miles, it's not necessarily any harder, because you're just going to get fitter as you go. The hardest part is just being away from home for that long, I guess. So, I wasn't too nervous about a longer trail per se, because I've had plenty of practice on long distance hikes before. Kale is Living asks, biggest advice for someone who is planning on doing the PCT next year? That's a great question. I've had a ton of people reach out to me who are planning to do the trail next year, and I'm so excited for you. I've probably touched on it a bit already, but the biggest advice would be to just get some time on feet before getting onto the trail. Test your gear is an important one as well. So get your daily steps up. Make sure you test your gear before getting onto trail. But other than that, just don't stress out too much. A lot of people, I think, worry before getting onto a big adventure like the PCT, and there's not a whole lot to worry about because a lot of stuff is just out of your control. I like to think of a through hike as just lots of small backpacking trips crammed together back to back to back, because you're going to be going into a town for a full resupply and potentially a night off trail fairly often, every 3, 4, 5 days. The longest you're going to spend on a trail section without seeing civilization is probably 7 or 8 days on the PCT. So just think of it as a lot of, 5-day backpacking trips back to back to back, and you'll figure it out as you go. There's no point stressing too much before getting on trail. Mako As Mummy, I'm sorry if I just butchered your Instagram username. You ask, did you already know your PCT trail family before you started? No, I went over to the US completely alone, not knowing a single person that would be hiking the trail. And I think most people are in that situation as well. And I met my trail family, which originally was 7 people for a good chunk of the trail. I met them all very early on the trail. And once again, that is very common. Most people will meet other hikers, in the first week of trail, and they'll find people they connect with and they'll start hiking with them. The PCT is, pretty known for, trail families, I guess. Not many people walk the entire trail alone. And even though I was kind of expecting to be solo for a lot of it, I met some incredible people during the first week or so of hiking, and ended up pretty much hiking with them, or at least most of them, for the whole PCT. So it was pretty wild. Peggy asks, when did you meet Dan and Emma and decide to hike with them? So that's sort of a continuation from the last question. So Dan and Emma I hiked with for pretty much the entire trail. I mentioned I had a trail family of 7 for a good chunk of the trek, but it was about the halfway point of the PCT that I separated from the group, and Dan, Emma and I pretty much stuck together for the rest of the trail. So I met Dan and Emma in San Diego, which I flew into San Diego a couple of days before the Pacific Crest Trail, and there's a famous trail angel house hosted, Scout and Frodo are their names. They host through hikers every year in San Diego before the trek, and a lot of international hikers especially go there to spend a couple nights in the city before starting their trek, and that's where I met Dan and Emma. So I met those guys at Scout and Frodo Trail Angel House, and we kind of got to know each other a little bit. Didn't plan to hike together or anything, but we crossed paths on the PCT in the first couple of weeks, and really connected. I didn't connect with many people on the trail. Everyone's very different from different backgrounds and different countries. I didn't meet anyone that I didn't like necessarily, but to hike with someone for that long, you really have to be compatible, and Dan and Em were that for me from very early on. And obviously we walked 2,500 miles together, so we definitely liked each other a little bit at least. I couldn't really imagine walking the PCT without them, to be honest. Loza asks, can you do a reunion podcast with Dan and Emma as guests? We'll definitely have to do that. I got to figure out how to do a podcast online, because we all live in different parts of the world. Dan's also an Australian, but he lives further east in Australia. I'm on the west coast, and Emma is American. So we will have to figure that out, because any chance to catch up with those guys, I'm all for. And I'm sure you guys would like to listen to some of our stories that we had together. It was definitely a wild journey, experiencing the PCT for 140 days with 2 strangers like that. What were your trail names, and how do you go about getting one? Trail names. Trail names are an interesting concept. It's very prevalent in the US, where other hikers will basically bestow a name upon you that is not your real name, and it can be for any reason. Generally, it's something quirky or funny that you do on trail, and someone will just name you after that thing. For me, I don't know, I find trail names a little strange, a little cringe. I'm definitely in the minority on that. I think most people love trail names and find it super fun, but I personally did not take a trail name on the Pacific Crest Trail, because once again, I found it weird. I like calling people by their real name, and I like being called by my real name, which is fine. Not everyone has trail names, but I definitely had quite a few people try and give me trail names, which is cool. I think my trail family called me Shakira, even though I didn't necessarily accept it. Apparently when I walk, I wobble the hips a bit, so you can probably see why that name was chosen for me. But I guess I'll save Dan and Emma's trail names for when we do a joint podcast together. I won't out them just now. Cedro asks, how much did your pack weigh? What tent, pack, mat and stove did you use? So I do have a full gear list video on my YouTube channel, Cam Bostock, if you wanted to get sort of a detailed look at everything that I took on trail with me. I also have a lighter pack list with all my gear, which I'll link in the description of this podcast for you guys to check out. But my pack weighed about 10 pounds, so 5 kilograms. So I went really ultra light, which was the goal coming into the trail. I wanted to see how light I could go. And the lighter your pack, obviously, the easier the hike will be. You do make sacrifices in comfort in places, but for me, I just wanted to join that ultralight club, and I was really happy with my setup. As far as my specific gear pieces that you asked there, so my tent, I used a Durston X Mid trekking pole tent. Absolutely loved it. My pack was a custom-made pack from Zero G Gear, which is an Aussie maker. Incredible pack, weighed less than a pound. My mat was a Thermarest. I think it's X Lite, I believe it's called. Really great mat. And I used a jet boil for my stove, which I love jet boils. Not the lightest option, but definitely my favorite. Sigai asks how many battery packs were required to keep your phone alive before the next town. So yeah, I did bring a couple of battery packs with me. I actually started with 2 battery packs, a 20,000 milliamp and a 10,000 milliamp. I do film a lot when I'm on trail, as you guys could probably guess, and so my battery gets drained a lot. In saying that, I didn't really ever use more than 20,000 milliamps worth of power between towns. In fact, I lost my 10,000 milliamp battery pack, my secondary battery pack, at some point around the halfway mark, and I never really missed it. So 20,000 milliamps was enough for me. I definitely cut it close a couple times. I'm not just charging my phone, obviously. I've got a watch, a headlamp, I've got a satellite communicator, and the 20,000 milliamps just got me through most of the time. I definitely had to ration my phone battery a couple of times just to make sure I could film each day. But I would say for most people, you wouldn't really ever need more than 20,000 milliamps. That's what worked for me pretty well. Carrie asks, was there any gear you found that you didn't use or any gear that you wanted? No, I didn't really change pretty much anything in my pack from start to finish on the trail, besides a couple things. I think I started with rain pants, and I didn't start with a rain jacket. I just started with a poncho, and I found that I just didn't use my rain pants or poncho at all, and so I ended up ditching the rain pants maybe a month into the trail. It just doesn't rain much on the PCT during summer. Sometimes it does, and then you probably regret not having it. So most people do carry them, but I ditched my rain pants, and I didn't get a rain jacket back until Washington. So I did end up getting a rain jacket sent to me at Cascade Locks just before starting the Washington section of the trail, because it was forecasted to be a bit wetter, and I did use it a couple times, so I was grateful to have that. Other than rain gear, I don't think I honestly changed anything in my gear. I did start with a t-shirt, and I soon quickly switched to a sun hoodie because the t-shirt was just, it wasn't working for me in the desert. The sun was brutal, and I just needed to cover my skin rather than slopping sunscreen all over me all day, every day. So that's probably another change that I made, t-shirt to sun hoodie. Other than that, I really can't think of much. Everything that I started with, I pretty much ended with, and once again, I have a full video going over all my gear on my YouTube channel. DGT asks, did you have all town stops and resupplies pre-planned? Definitely not. No, pretty much 0 of my town stops and resupplies were planned. I think I mentioned it earlier in the podcast, but coming in to the start line on the southern terminus of the PCT, I really didn't know what even was on trail past the first week. I couldn't have told you any of the towns or anything like that. It was all just planned as I went. There is literally 0 point planning resupplies ahead of time, because you just never know your pace. You never know when you're going to get to places, and you'll figure it out along the way. It's just how it works. You'll figure everything out. You'll plan your next resupply when you're at your current resupply, and you'll just keep going like that throughout the whole trek. So 0 planning was done beforehand. In a similar vein, SMRS Pia asks, how far ahead did you plan your night camping spots? Once again, it was pretty much the day of. You know, I'd wake up in the morning, or maybe I'd check it in my tent the night before. I check the map on my phone. We use an app called Far Out, which gives you a really detailed look at the trail and where camping options are, where water sources are. So I'd check that map, probably in my tent at night, and that's when I'd roughly plan out where I was hoping to camp the next day. Obviously, I'd discuss that with the rest of my trail family, but it would never be more than a day out that I'd plan where to camp, because there's just no point planning that far ahead. You just never know how far you're going to walk each day, let alone how far you're going to walk in a week. And so it was all just on the fly. Chamber asked realistic budget to do the PCT, all in, excluding flights. So not including flights, I think I spent about $10,000 US, maybe a bit more or less if I missed something, but I do remember adding it all up just when I got home from trail. It was about $10,000 US for me. Flights were another couple thousand extra, but that's not applicable to you, especially if you live in the US. Flights are going to be different from wherever you're coming from. And I think $10,000 US is probably pretty average. I think some people spend a lot more than that. Some people get away with spending a lot less. I wasn't particularly frugal on the trail. I was quite happy to eat out in towns. I was quite happy to buy, a bit more quality produce when I resupplied. I spent the occasional night in like a motel or an Airbnb when I was in towns as well. So I wasn't penny pinching or anything, but I also didn't go all out and stay in fancy hotels multiple nights in a row in towns and stuff like that. I spent a lot of time camping when I could and saving money when I could. So yeah, I think $10,000 for most people would be enough, more than enough for a lot of people. But if you do have more money budgeted away, you can definitely walk the trail a bit more luxuriously. Nadia asks, financially, how do you make it work? Yeah, that's a great question, and it's different for everyone, I guess, on the trail. Some people work really hard and then they'll take time off work to go hiking. Sometimes people are lucky and their parents will give them money to go hiking because it's a dream of theirs, or whatever the reason is. I'm very lucky personally because I am able to hike for a living. This is what I do for a job. I make videos online of my hikes, and I get supported by brands which pay me money to use their products and that kind of thing. So walking the Pacific Crest Trail for me was almost work. I was away for work, and so that's how I make it work financially. Obviously, that's quite a unique circumstance and something that I've built up over many years to be able to do it like that. But yeah, it's definitely different for everyone. Broham asks, what's the oldest PCT you saw on trail and how well did they do? The oldest person that I met going end to end was probably about 70. I can't remember exactly, but there were plenty of older people hiking the trail. Definitely some older people that were just doing sections. I think I met a 78-year-old who was doing like a week-long section. But there was plenty of people in their 60s that I met, at least, hiking the entire trail, which is super inspiring. If I'm through hiking at that age, I will be very, very happy. JRF asks, any hikers in their 60s? I'll be 60 next year and like to do the PCT. Yeah, so many hikers in their 60s. If you are 60 years old and fairly active, you can do the trail. You might have to take it slow at the start if you haven't done a lot of like long distance hiking, but it is more than possible. And I think a lot of the time older people are more likely to be successful in the trail just because they have a lot of time, often retired or whatever the case may be, and so they have a lot of flexibility about when they can start and finish, which is a huge help. Susano asks, how do you get in contact with Trail Angels? Is there a community app? Yeah, so for those who don't know, Trail Angels are a huge part of the Pacific Crest Trail. Trail Angels are people that are not hiking the trail, but go out of their way to help hikers, whether that's giving us a lift into town or hosting us at their home or feeding us or bringing food out to the trail, whatever it may be. Trail Angels are incredible and really make the PCT what it is. And there are actually so many people. It was one of the biggest surprises for me, how many people are willing to just go out of their way and give up their time and money to help hikers. As far as contacting Trail Angels, it's different for different sections of the trail. There's a lot of Facebook groups that are like Oregon Trail Angels or Southern California Trail Angels that will have all the people in there that are willing to help hikers, and you can kind of jump on those pages and message people or put a post up. I didn't do much of that, but There's also a lot of people posting on Far Out, which is the app we use for through hiking, saying, I'm willing to help here, or if you're coming to this town, let me know, I'll come pick you up. And so you can call them or contact them through Far Out. There's also, a lot of times trail angels will put up like flyers at the trailhead, letting you know that they're willing to come pick you up. There's lots of ways to get in contact with trail angels, that's for sure, and they are just the most incredible people. It'd be a lot harder to hike the PCT without trail angels, let's put it that way. So very grateful for those legends. Oriana asks, how well did you sleep, and or how well did you cope with sleep deprivation? I slept really well, to be honest. It was something that I prioritized, and something that I always prioritize on these long distance treks was sleep. So I think overall I slept great on the PCT. If you're not sleeping, you're not recovering, and if you're not recovering, hiking all day, every day is just not sustainable. So it's something everyone should focus on. For me, it was just about making sure I was in bed 8 or 9 hours before I was planning to wake up. I don't have much trouble getting to sleep on trail, just because you're so exhausted at the end of the day that as soon as your head hits the pillow, at least for me, I just pass out. And so as long as I can get to sleep with enough time to sleep that 8 or 9 hours before waking up, then I don't usually have an issue. In saying that, there were some weeks on trail where we were really pushing the distance, and that eats into your sleeping time sometimes. And so there were some days where I had 4 hours sleep. Some nights I just couldn't sleep for whatever reason. And yeah, as long as that's not multiple days in a row or like a common thing, I don't struggle too much with the sleep deprivation. I can usually hike a full day on a 4 hours sleep or whatever. But if it becomes like a regular thing, that's when you're in trouble. I did do the 24-hour challenge on the PCT, which is just hiking for 24 hours straight. And obviously that means, not sleeping. And by the end of that day, I was pretty wrecked, but I think I managed pretty well, to be honest, without any sleep. I was able to push for the full 24 hours, aided by a lot of caffeine, sure, but, you kind of get used to having less sleep at times and more sleep at other times, and it all balances out ideally over the long haul. Skim asks, how was your wife comfortable and supportive letting you go for so long? Great question. One I get a lot when people realize that I'm married. I have been married for 8 or 9 years, I believe. I hope I got that right. And I have the most incredible supportive wife on planet Earth. Karis, she fully supports me and fully backs me going on these big trips. I think part of the reason that she's so supportive is that this is my job. I hike for a living, as I mentioned earlier. I make my money by through hiking and getting outside, because that's how I'm able to promote products that brands pay me to promote. So getting outside is my job, but spending 5 months away from my wife is whether I'm working or not is not easy. So we definitely both struggled a lot during the PCT. It's the longest we've spent apart, and I don't think I would go away for that long again without seeing Karis. But yeah, she's just the most supportive wife on planet Earth. And we talked every day while I was on trail. If I had reception, we'd be FaceTiming and chatting on the phone together. If I didn't have reception, I'd be texting her through my satellite device. So we were in constant communication, and I didn't feel like we kind of missed out on too much of each other's lives because we're just always chatting. But not being physically with each other was really hard. So yeah, so that's something we've practiced over the years. I've traveled quite a bit, and Karis has also traveled quite a bit. Yeah, we're still learning. It's still hard, and both making sacrifices for sure. Lynn asks, in your posts, you never looked sad or mad. Were you at times troubled? I don't think I was really sad or mad ever. I know that's probably crazy to hear, but I was living the dream on the Pacific Crest Trail. I really was living the dream. Every single day I loved. Every single moment I loved. Even when it was really hard, even when things were a little miserable, I honestly loved it. And a lot of people did comment on how positive I seemed, and I wasn't ever faking it. I was loving it on trail. Loving it. And yeah, I think I'm a bit weird because I really enjoy suffering a little bit. I love when things get hard. I love pushing myself. So even on those really tough days on trail where I just was exhausted and sore and things were just challenging, I loved it. I loved it so much, and I could always kind of smile through it. I think I was just in the mindset of like, I'm so lucky to be hiking the Pacific Crest Trail. I'm literally living my dream out right now. And so if things get hard, that is okay. And I don't know, I think I had the right mindset going in, and I was able to keep that throughout. Saji asks, your top 3 favorite places on trail, i.e. the most beautiful? Good question. The Pacific Crest Trail is so incredibly beautiful throughout. It is kind of hard to pick 3 places. If I had to pick 3 places, number 1 would be Goat Rocks Wilderness in Washington, in the southern half of Washington. Incredible couple days on trail. Some of the most unreal views of the big volcanoes from that area. I loved it so much. Had an awesome sunset, an awesome sunrise up near Old Snowy Peak, I believe, where we camped one night. Just stunning. And then the other 2 of my top 3 would have to be parts of the Sierra, like Forester Pass and Mount Whitney. That region of the Sierra Nevada was just mind-blowing. I loved it so much. I also absolutely loved Muir Pass, I think further north in Sierra Nevada. When I walked through that section, it was just completely snowed over and just so wild and epic, and I loved it so much. So yeah, I guess Goat Rocks Wilderness, Muir Pass, and Mount Whitney. That would be my top 3. Parry asks, what was your favorite section and what was the most challenging section? My favorite section, if we're going off sort of the 5 main sections, so Southern California, Sierra, Northern California, Oregon, and Washington, my favorite section would be the Sierra Nevada for sure. It was just, it's just so wild out there. You don't see roads anywhere. There's no roads for weeks of walking, and there's no civilization, and you're just in pristine wilderness the whole time, and it's just so stunning. So the Sierra Nevada was a highlight for me. The most challenging section probably was Washington for me. I think, both physically and mentally it was the most challenging. Probably mentally because it was the last section. I was so close to the end and I was exhausted, and it was just a tough slog at times. And physically it was really hard as well, to be honest. Super mountainous, super technical. We had to do a few detours in Washington, which made things hard. So that would be the most challenging section for me. Eddie asks, was the trail always well marked? Did you ever think you were lost? The trail is well marked, yeah. There's not like a marker, every mile or anything, but there are lots of PCT markers, and the trail is just really well defined and really well looked after. So, it's easy to follow for the most part. I think you wouldn't want to, try going on trail without a map, at least a map on your phone. And so I always had the Far Out app with a GPS map at hand, and I definitely used that fairly often to make sure I was making the right turns and whatnot, because the PCT intersects with a lot of other trails throughout, and so it's easy to make a wrong turn, but the trail itself is so well maintained that it is pretty easy to follow with the map. I don't think I really ever got lost. Maybe 1 or 2 times I accidentally took a wrong trail, or maybe went the wrong way or something like that, but nothing major. It's an incredible trail. Sako Bell asks, did you ever feel unsafe at any time? I don't think I did. I saw quite a few bears, and I think probably the first couple bear sightings I was a little spooked out, just because that is something that I'm not used to. There's obviously no bears here in Australia, but once I realized that black bears really don't want anything to do with you, most of the bear sightings I had, there on out, weren't scary really as much. There's a couple of times I was walking in the nighttime, and just the idea of like a mountain lion stalking me, not that I ever saw one, but it probably happened. That was definitely spooky, but I wouldn't say I felt unsafe, pretty much ever. There were some sketchy sections of trail, but I'm a very confident hiker. I've done a lot of hiking in snow, a lot of technical hiking, and I was very confident in my ability throughout. So there was at no point where I thought I was going to like fall and die or anything like that. Katie asks, how safe would you say the PCT is to do as a single female? That's also another common question that I think a lot of PCTers get asked. It's something that I've been asked quite a bit. Obviously, I can't talk, from a female perspective, but I will say that I saw a lot of solo female hikers on the PCT. Obviously, people tend to group up, but there's definitely a lot of chicks that start by themselves, and I never really heard of anyone feeling unsafe as a solo female hiker. Nothing outside of seeing a bear or a sketchy piece of trail. You're most likely not going to hike alone for very long on the trail anyway. So if you are a solo hiker who doesn't have anyone that will hike with you on the PCT, you're going to find a trail family. You're going to find people that you connect with pretty soon, and you're not going to be alone for very long anyway. So don't let that fear stop you. Rujul asks, how did you edit content while on trail? So yeah, I was editing daily vlogs on Instagram. Every single day on trail, I made a video essentially, and I get a lot of people asking, how did you manage that? Did you have an editor? All these questions, and the truth is, no, I didn't have an editor. I edited and filmed everything myself, and the way I do it is I just keep it really, really simple. So I don't have any camera gear with me. I don't have any external gear outside of just my iPhone. Everything gets filmed on my iPhone. Everything gets edited on my iPhone. All my voiceover, all my captions, all that kind of stuff. It all happens on my phone, and I would edit every night in my tent. That was basically how I got it done. Spend an hour or two every night just organizing all my clips from the day, putting them all into my editing app. I use the app called CapCut on my phone, do my edit, do my voiceover, and most of the time that was enough time to get it done. I have become quite efficient at editing. I've done a lot of this kind of stuff before, but also I would spend a lot of time while I was in towns, editing and doing all the stuff that required phone reception, because on trail often there was no mobile reception, so I couldn't really post and stuff like that. So when I was in towns, I would schedule all my posts to kind of go up while I was on trail, and that helped as well. But yeah, a lot of extra time spent editing on trail, there's no doubt about that. I think a lot of people wouldn't enjoy that, and they'd probably take away from their hike, but for me, I love it. I love editing, I love sharing, I love, inspiring other people to get outside as well. And so I looked forward to getting my videos edited every night in my tent. I look forward to posting, and for me, it added a lot to the experience. I think it added so much. I get to look back on every single day of my trek on the Pacific Crest Trail and relive those memories and those moments, and that to me is invaluable. And I also get to inspire other people to get outside as well. So yeah, really epic, and so worth all the extra effort on trail. Surf asks, what was your favorite animal encounter? Wow, yeah, there was so many incredible animals, so much wildlife on the trail, and so radically different to what I'm used to when I'm hiking back home in Australia. My favorite, I'd have to say the bears that I saw, the black bears. That would have to be my favorite animal. I think I saw 6 black bears, a couple of them really close on trail, a couple of cubs as well, and those encounters were incredible. But even stuff like seeing a deer, for me, a wild deer is really cool. Saw a lot of deer, obviously saw some elk as well, loved it. And some of the smaller alpine mammals like marmots and pikers, and even chipmunks and squirrels, all of that super exciting to me, just because it's all very new and unique. The wildlife on the PCT was a big highlight. Tony asks, were you healthy the whole time, or did you ever feel ill? Yeah, I think it was a bit of luck and a bit of experience and planning and prep, but I didn't get sick once on the entire Pacific Crest Trail. I didn't get injured once on the entire Pacific Crest Trail. I didn't even get a single blister. So, I was very lucky in a way, because a lot of people get their hikes ruined by injury or sickness. But, like I said, I have done a lot of hiking before, and I know how to avoid this kind of stuff. So I guess I'll go through some of the precautions and things I did to avoid that stuff. My shoe and sock combo has been tried and tested, and I wear Hoka Speed Goats, and I wear Injinji toe socks, or any toe socks really. There's another brand called Creepers, which I really like. That combo of shoe sock just doesn't give me blisters. No matter how far I walk, no matter how wet they get, I don't get blisters. And so that is a huge leg up I have on people that are suffering with blisters, because that can just make your hike miserable. I just know how to avoid injury a lot as well. Obviously freak accidents can happen. I was pretty lucky to not have any of those freak accidents where I broke something, but as far as overuse injuries from just lots of hiking, I know how to avoid it. I've done a lot of long distance hiking before. First thing would be to just train a little bit before starting the hike. I did quite a bit of training before starting, so I came in with a good base. And then I just was really slow to pick up the miles on trail. I started with low miles, and I slowly increased my mileage as I walked throughout the weeks. And that's the biggest mistake people make, is they are so excited when they start a long trail like this, and they'll just walk a huge amount of miles in the first day or the first week or even the first month. And that's when you're going to get overuse injuries. Your body and your legs, your muscles, your tendons, your ligaments, they just haven't built up the strength to withstand that level of hiking yet. And then just getting really prioritizing recovery. So getting 8+ hours of sleep every night, getting quality nutrition in as much as possible. Obviously, you're eating a lot of crap on trail, but I really tried to focus on getting fresh fruit and veg in, getting a lot of protein in to help the recovery. I also took a supplement every single day. It's actually a supplement that I developed myself. It's called OptiVenture, and I took 2 servings of OptiVenture every single day. It's like a multivitamin and a probiotic and magnesium and turmeric and omega-3s all in one supplement. I really attribute a lot of my lack of injury and sickness to that supplement. I'm hoping to actually launch OptiVenture very soon, so you guys can start using it on your adventures as well. But that was a huge help for me. Tara asks, what is the toilet situation with carrying out waste? Did your bidet work? Yeah, toileting is an interesting experience in the wild, obviously. In the US, you cannot bury toilet paper, so you have to carry toilet paper out with you. You can bury your poop, and obviously you can pee in the wild as well. So that's fine. But yeah, the toilet paper situation's a bit challenging. So I opted to use a backcountry bidet, which essentially is just a tiny little plastic nozzle that you attach to the top of your water bottle, and it acts as a bidet. You squeeze your water bottle, and a pretty powerful stream of water will come out of the bidet and clean you off. Once you have a bit of practice with it, it works really well. And so for the most part, I just used a bidet, a few hundred mils of water each time you take a dump, instead of using a ton of toilet paper, which you have to carry out. But I think most people do just use toilet paper. And so most people have a little Ziploc bag where all their used toilet paper goes in, and then when they get to a town, they'll dump it somewhere. There are people that just bury their toilet paper. Some people that don't even bother burying their toilet paper. I did see used toilet paper sprawled out near the trail quite often, which is really disappointing. But for me, the backcountry bidet is a no-brainer. The idea of just carrying like tons and tons of used toilet paper in my backpack is kind of disgusting and pointless. So yeah, highly recommend the bidet. This is the last question. Zyrago asked, did you ever think about quitting? Not a single time. Not a single time. It was never a moment during the 140 days that I was on trail that I wanted to give up or quit. Maybe that would have been different if I was really sick or got injured, which I was lucky not to. But even when things were really hard, even when I was in a lot of pain or, really tired or whatever it was, there wasn't a single time where I wanted to go home. I definitely missed home. And by the time I was finished, I was ready to go home. But there was no way that I was stopping that PCT. There was pretty much nothing that could have stopped me from finishing that trail. When I started it, I knew I was going to reach the end. I was 100% sure I was going to reach the end. And unless I broke my leg or, something catastrophic happened, I was reaching the end no matter what. And so for me, there wasn't a single moment where I wanted to quit or felt like quitting. And, that kind of mindset probably helped me get to the end. I think, not many people finish the Pacific Crest Trail. I think a few thousand people start each year. A very small percentage, like 20 or 30% of people actually finish the trail, and a lot less finish the trail while having walked all the miles as well. A lot of people skip a lot of the trail. So, and I was one of those few that did finish, and I think having that mindset of I'm getting to the end no matter what definitely helped. All right, that's all the questions I have here in my notes. Thank you guys so much for listening. This was episode 1 of the Life Outside podcast. I'm sure I rambled quite a bit, and there was a bunch of issues with the sound or whatever, which I will hopefully fix over time. But if you are listening to this right now it means that it was good enough to post. And yeah, I'm excited to get it out there. If you have any feedback, please let me know. Comment below on wherever you're listening to this to, or send me a message. Let me know what you thought of the first episode. And yeah, I'm excited to bring more shows to you guys over the coming weeks. I will do a bunch more solo episodes talking about different trails and, you know, different experiences I've had. But I also want to, you know, talk to some other people, other hikers, other outdoor creators, other people who just love being outside as well, and share their stories and go a bit deeper. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Excited you're here, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Cheers.